We both avoided the topic, not because it was forbidden, and not because it was too painful to approach. We avoided it because it hadn't yet demanded attention. There was no visible urgency, no immediate consequence that forced the conversation forward. The topic existed, but it remained slightly off to the side, present without being central. At first, avoiding it felt mutual, unspoken but shared. Neither of us brought it up. Neither of us asked whether that absence was intentional. The silence felt coordinated. Even though nothing had been agreed upon, we both avoided the topic, because addressing it would have required stopping. Stopping would have meant shifting the tone, slowing the pace, turning attention toward something unresolved. Avoidance allowed continuity. The conversation moved around it naturally. Other subjects filled the space. Time passed without disruption. From the outside, everything appeared intact, which made the avoidance feel reasonable. I told myself that timing mattered, that some topics need the right moment, that forcing them too early can do more harm than good. That logic was convincing. The topic didn't disappear. It simply remained dormant. Dormant things don't interfere. They wait. We both avoided the topic, because neither of us wanted to be the one to introduce weight into an otherwise balanced exchange. Bringing it up would have changed the dynamic. It would have required acknowledgement, perhaps clarification, possibly disagreement. Avoidance preserved neutrality. Neutrality is comfortable. It doesn't ask for commitment. It allows multiple interpretations to coexist without conflict. At the time, that felt like maturity. I assumed the topic would surface naturally, if it truly mattered. That assumption allowed me to stay passive, without feeling negligent. We didn't argue. We didn't confront. We didn't even come close, which made the absence of discussion feel like proof that discussion wasn't necessary. We both avoided the topic, and nothing fell apart. That reinforced the behavior. Avoidance rarely announces itself as a choice. It presents itself as patience, as restraint, as respect for boundaries that haven't been clearly drawn. The topic lingered quietly, in the background of our interactions. It didn't interrupt. It didn't insist. So we continued. I noticed how carefully we navigated around it, how certain sentences stopped just short of where the topic might emerge. The avoidance became refined, subtle. It didn't feel like denial. It felt like management. Managing the topic meant managing expectations. If it wasn't discussed, it didn't need to be resolved. Resolution implies consequence. Avoidance postpones consequence. We both avoided the topic, because postponement felt harmless. Time has a way of softening urgency. Each passing day made the topic feel less immediate, not less important, just less actionable. The longer it went unaddressed, the harder it became to introduce. Raising it later would have required explanation. Why now? Why after so much time? Those questions discouraged initiation. Silence had become established. Established silence feels stable. It creates the impression that nothing is missing, but stability built on avoidance is provisional. I began to notice small adjustments. Expectations quietly shifted. Certain assumptions were revised internally, without being spoken aloud. We adapted to the absence of discussion, rather than challenging it. Adaptation is efficient. It minimizes friction, but it also normalizes incompleteness. We both avoided the topic, and in doing so, we allowed parallel interpretations to form. Each of us carried our own understanding of what the silence meant. Those understandings were never compared. They didn't need to be, as long as the topic remained untouched. I told myself that mutual avoidance suggested mutual agreement, that if it mattered to them, they would bring it up, that if it mattered to me, I would too. This circular logic sustained the silence. Responsibility was deferred indefinitely. We both avoided the topic, because neither of us wanted to risk discovering that our assumptions differed. Avoidance protected harmony by preventing verification. Verification can be disruptive. It can reveal misalignment, where comfort had been assumed. The topic stayed unspoken, and because it stayed unspoken, it became heavier. Not emotionally heavier, but structurally. Unaddressed things accumulate influence, precisely because they lack boundaries. They shape behavior indirectly. I noticed how the topic influenced decisions, without ever being named. Choices were made with it in mind. Conversations were steered around it. It had become a reference point, without having been acknowledged as one. We both avoided the topic, and that avoidance began to define what was possible to discuss. Some questions felt inappropriate, not because they were wrong, but because they threatened to expose the avoided subject. Avoidance narrowed the range of conversation, without anyone explicitly choosing that limitation. This narrowing happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. I didn't feel constrained. I felt accommodated, which made the cost difficult to detect. At no point did the topic demand confrontation. It never forced itself into focus. That's the danger of mutual avoidance. It removes the pressure that might otherwise prompt resolution. Without pressure, things can remain unresolved indefinitely. We both avoided the topic, and eventually, the opportunity to address it felt less available. Not because it was too late, but because it would have required undoing the silence we had both maintained. Breaking an established pattern requires intention. Intention introduces accountability. Avoidance avoids that. I don't believe avoidance is always harmful. Sometimes it allows space for clarity to develop. But clarity that isn't pursued rarely arrives on its own. We had mistaken avoidance for patience. They are not the same. Patience moves toward understanding at a measured pace. Avoidance moves away from it without admitting direction. We both avoided the topic, and that mutual decision felt balanced. But balance without examination can quietly shift. By the time I realized that the topic had begun to shape the relationship more than we acknowledged, it had already become part of the structure, not a problem, not a conflict, just an absence that had grown influential. We never agreed to avoid the topic. We simply did, and that shared silence, more than any spoken decision, determined what followed. We both avoided the topic, and in doing so, we allowed something important to remain present without ever being addressed.